Hey guys, I miss you so much. Like, it is unbelievable how much I miss being in the classroom with you guys. And in an effort to feel more connected with the younger generations, I decided maybe it would be fun to try the whipped coffee thing that everybody's doing on TikTok. So here it is.
Je bois les thèmes pioniers, les vitons j'étais, et les jontons les opas, les gisons l'été, on boit je les temps, les disponeros.
Hey y'all, it's a couch kind of day, so here I am on my couch doing some math with you. We're going to start with number 3. It is 5x squared minus 10 equals 70. So the first thing I want to do is make sure all my x's are on one side and all my numbers are on the other. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides, and I end up with 5x squared equals 80. And now I want the x squared by itself, so I'm going to divide by 5, and I end up with x squared equals 16. The opposite of something squared is a square root, so I'll take a square root of both sides. So I end up with x equals, the square root of 16 is 4, but it is also negative 4, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 4 times negative 4 is still positive 16. So our x is positive or negative 4. So that's number 3. Now I have number 4, which is 2x squared plus 4x equals 0. And an easy way to solve this one is to find the GCF, the greatest common factor. So I'm looking in here, and I know that both of these have 2x in common. So I'll pull out a 2x, and what's left inside, I end up with x plus 2 equals 0. And I got what's inside by dividing both of these by 2x to pull it to the outside. So now I am going to set this side equal to 0. I end up with 2x equals 0. And I'll set this side equal to 0, which is x plus 2 equals 0. So now on this side, I'll divide by 2, divide by 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. So x equals 0. Or on this side, I'll subtract 2, and I end up with x equals negative 2. So both of these guys are your answer. All right, number 5, at first glance, looks like it's going to be slip and slide, but it's not, because all 3 of these have a GCF of 2. I'm going to factor out a 2. So I end up with x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. And now what I'm going to do is find numbers that multiply up to negative 3 and add up to negative 2. So if I'm looking for numbers that multiply up to negative 3, I know that 1 times 3 gives me 3. One of these numbers has to be negative. Since this is a negative 2, the bigger number becomes negative. So we end up with 2 times x plus 1 times x minus 3 equals 0. Now, if we want to solve for x, I'm going to set both of these factors equal to 0. I'm not setting the 2 equal to 0 because it's not an x. So I end up with x plus 1 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. I'll subtract 1 from both sides. I end up with x equals negative 1. And I'll add 3 to both sides, and I end up with x equals 3. Number 6 is completing the square. So the first thing I'm going to do is get all of these numbers to the same side of the equation. So I will subtract 9. I end up with 2x squared minus 4x minus 6 equals 0. And now here I can also pull out a GCF. I'm only going to pull it out of these first 2 terms though. My GCF that I can pull out is 2. So I'll pull out a 2, and in here I end up with x squared minus 2x, and I'll leave 2 spaces in here. Minus 6 equals 0. So what we're going to do to complete the square is figure out what makes this a perfect square trinomial. So I'll draw my square. I know that half of negative 2x is negative 1x. That means that up here I have an x minus 1 times x minus 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, and x times x is x squared. So here's my x squared, here's my 2x. I'll add 1, but you can't just randomly add something in. You also need to subtract 1. I'm going to erase my box to make some space. So now this perfect square trinomial becomes x minus 1 squared. So I'll bring down my 2 because it was already here. X minus 1 squared minus 1. And this whole section is impacted by this 2. Minus 6 equals 0. I'll distribute this 2 in to my negative 1. So x minus 1 squared, 2x minus 1 squared minus 2 minus 6 equals 0. I'll bring this together. I end up with negative 8. And this is what we were looking to achieve here. Number 7 says to use the quadratic formula, and they give us 2x squared minus 4x equals 6. What I want to do is get everything to the same side of the equation, so I will subtract 6 from both sides. And I end up with, I'm going to write it up here to leave space, but 2x squared minus 4x minus 6 equals 0. And now our quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I'll plug in my a value, my b value, and my c value. X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 6 all over 2 times 2. And now I can combine some steps, but I'm going to do some PEMDAS. So I end up with x equals negative 4 is positive 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 times negative 4 is 16 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times negative 6 is 48, but a negative times a negative is a positive, so this becomes plus 48 all over 4. X equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 64, because 16 plus 48 is 64, divided by 4. This is where you break it up into 2 equations because it's plus or minus. So I have x equals 4 plus 8 over 4, and x equals 4 minus 8 over 4. So I end up with x equals 4 plus 8 is 12, divided by 4 is 3. And 4 minus 8 is negative 4, divided by 4 is negative 1. And those are our answers. So I'm going to assign you guys if you're going to do questions 9, 10, or 11, and you can do that on Flipgrid.